to Deep Sleep Stories. If these stories have helped you through restless nights, please leave a review. Reviews are what help this podcast grow, reach more listeners, and stay alive. Without them, even something meaningful can slowly disappear. So if this show has brought you comfort, that small act truly helps keep it going. Now, settle in, and let's begin.
Welcome to Deep Sleep Stories, a quiet place where your day can soften at the edges and gently fade into rest. Tonight's tale is about an old riverside mill and a floral picnic laid out like a secret invitation waiting in the twilight. Forehead to smooth, if it feels forehead to smooth. If it feels comfortable, take a slow breath in through your nose and let it flow out with ease like a sigh that doesn't need to be heard. You can imagine the room around you growing calmer with every exhale. The sounds you notice are allowed to drift by without catching you. Thoughts, too, can come and go like small clouds crossing a wide, patient sky. You don't have to follow them. You don't have to solve them. You can simply let them pass and return to the simple rhythm of breathing. In your mind's eye, picture a path that wanders through gentle countryside. The air is mild and fresh, carrying the scent of damp earth and crushed leaves. Somewhere nearby, water speaks in a low, continuous hush. The world feels softened, as if it's been brushed with a layer of dusk-colored velvet. The light is honeyed and slow, the kind of light that makes everything look a little kinder. As you breathe, imagine that you're stepping onto that path without any hurry. Your feet find the ground easily. Your body feels supported, steady, safe. Each step is quieter than the last until you barely notice the act of moving at all. The path leads you toward a place that has been waiting for a long time. An old mill by a river, surrounded by wildflowers, where calmness gathers like a warm shawl around your shoulders. And as you rest here, listening, you won't have to do anything at all. The story can carry itself. It can carry you too, not far from that path where the river bends and the trees lean close as if sharing a secret. The old mill stood in peaceful retirement. Its stones were softened by moss, its wooden wheel darkened by years of water and weather, its windows brightened by vines that had learned to climb without being asked. The mill had once been a working heart of the valley, turning grain into flour with patient devotion. But now it was simply a landmark of quiet, an elder presence beside the stream, a place that seemed to breathe with the landscape. The river slid past with a silvery murmur, never stopping, never hurrying. It polished the pebbles, combed the reeds, and made small rippling patterns that caught the last of the light. Overhead, the sky held the lingering colors of evening, pale gold thinning into lavender, lavender melting into a deeper, velvety blue. Fallen pieces of sky, and taller stems, fallen pieces of sky, and taller stems crowned with soft purple heads. The flowers moved together like a slow tide, and their fragrance drifted in layers, sweet, green, and faintly honeyed. On a day like this, a traveler came to the mill without any particular reason except that the path had led there and the air had felt inviting. Her name was Elowen, and she walked with the unhurried pace of someone who had learned that rushing only startles the soul. She was not lost. She was not searching for anything complicated. She was simply wandering, letting the countryside choose the direction, letting curiosity be gentle rather than sharp. Elowen's cloak was the color of softened pine needles, and the hem carried the faintest evidence of the road, a dusting of pale earth, the clinging leaf, the suggestion of distance. Her hair was loosely braided, with a few wisps escaping to frame her face. When she saw the mill, she slowed even more, as though she had stepped into a place where sound itself preferred to whisper. She paused at the edge of the meadow and listened. The river's voice was steady, comforting. The wheel, though it no longer ground grain, still turned in the current, not because anyone demanded it, but because water enjoys moving things, and the wheel had always enjoyed being moved. The turning made a soft, rhythmic creak, like a lullaby hummed by old wood. Elowen breathed in. The scent of wildflowers was thicker here, more generous. There was also the smell of damp stone and warm bark, the grounded perfume of a world that had been sunlit all day and was now cooling into evening. She crossed the meadow with care, not wanting to crush any blossoms. The flowers seemed to make room for her, bending aside as her boots brushed past. A small white moth drifted near her shoulder, then floated away. In the grass, something rustled. Perhaps a rabbit, perhaps only the grass itself shifting in the breeze. When she reached the mill, she found a low wooden bench tucked beneath a window, as if someone had once paused there to rest while waiting for flour to be bagged. Elowen sat down and let herself be still. The stillness was not empty. It was full of soft noises, of slow movements, of gentle life. A pair of swallows looped through the air and vanished under the mill's eaves. The river continued to speak in its calm language. The vines on the stone wall fluttered their leaves like quiet applause. Elowen's eyelids grew heavy for a moment, not with sleep exactly, but with the pleasant weight of peace. She might have stayed there until night finished unfolding, but then she noticed something that made her smile in mild surprise. Carefully, as if placed by patient hands, small blooms in shades of pink and cream, their stems woven together with ribbons of green. The ring rested on a flat stone, like a wreath set down gently. Elowen stood and approached. The flowers were fresh, as if gathered moments ago, and yet there was no one in sight. No footprints in the damp ground, no sounds of another traveler, only the mill, the meadow, and the river. She crouched beside the wreath and noticed a small detail. Tucked into the woven stems was a tiny note made of pressed leaf, smooth and pale, inscribed with delicate markings. The markings were not quite letters, not quite drawings, but they suggested meaning in a way that felt easy to understand. Elowen did not need to read the symbols like a scholar. She understood them the way one understands a smile or a sigh. They carried a simple invitation. A picnic, they seemed to say. A floral picnic beside the old mill. Come as you are. Bring no worry. Allowan's heart warmed, not with excitement that would keep her awake, but with the soft comfort of being welcomed. She looked around again, half expecting someone to step from behind the mill with a basket and an apologetic laugh. No one came. The river turned the wheel. The wheel replied with its gentle creak. The meadow flowers nodded, as if agreeing that this was all perfectly normal. Alowan rose and followed a narrow path that curved around the mill toward the riverbank. The path was bordered by ferns and low plants, their leaves glossy and calm. As she walked, the air changed, cooler, slightly misted by the river's breath. The sound of water grew fuller, like a deeper lullaby. Around the bend, she found a small clearing beside the stream where the grass was shorter and softer, as if it had been brushed into place. And there, laid out with quiet elegance, was the picnic. A blanket spread across the grass looked as though it had been made from petals and woven light. It was patterned with faint floral shapes, roses, daisies, and something like star-shaped blossoms that might not exist in ordinary fields. The blanket did not flutter in the breeze. It rested perfectly content, as if it belonged there. At the center sat a basket, its lid slightly ajar. Around it were small dishes, smooth wooden plates, a tiny teapot that glimmered like polished stone, and cups that looked like they had been carved from seashells. A jar of honey caught the last warm light and held it as if it wished to keep it for later. Elowen approached slowly, her steps softened by wonder. She did not feel startled. The scene felt more like remembering than discovering, as if some quiet part of her had always known this picnic could exist. She knelt at the edge of the blanket. The scent that rose from it was gentle and layered, lavender and chamomile, a faint hint of rose, and the clean sweetness of clover. A dragonfly hovered near the teapot, its wings shimmering. It drifted in a small circle, then landed on a nearby stone as if it had finished its inspection and approved the arrangement. Elowen sat carefully on the blanket, her cloak folding around her like a leaf settling on water. She placed her hands on her knees and simply looked, letting her eyes move over the details without trying to explain them. The basket held soft bread wrapped in cloth, rounds of pale cheese dotted with herbs, and fruit that looked freshly washed by the river itself. There were small cakes, glazed with something that shone like morning dew. Sprigs of mint and tiny violets decorated the edges, more for beauty than necessity. Alowan reached for the teapot. It was warm, as if someone had poured tea only moments before. When she lifted it, it felt light and balanced in her hand. She poured into a cup, and the tea streamed out in a thin ribbon, releasing a fragrance that made her shoulders relax even more. She brought the cup to her lips and sipped. The taste was calm, not bland, not overly sweet, simply calm. It tasted like evenings that stretch out gently like soft blankets, like the moment just before sleep, when the world becomes kind. A small sound drifted through the clearing, something like a laugh, but quieter, like laughter remembered from far away. Elowen looked up. At first she saw only the flowers and grasses moving, the river gliding past, the old mill partially visible through a veil of leaves. Then she noticed the tiniest flickers of light near the edge of the clearing, as if fireflies had gathered early. The lights hovered and blinked in patterns that felt almost like conversation. They drifted closer, and Elowen realized they were not fireflies exactly, though they carried the same gentle glow. They moved with intention, pausing as if to observe her, then spiraling in a small dance above the blanket. Elowen did not speak. Somehow words felt too sharp for the softness of the place. Instead, she offered a quiet smile, the kind that requires nothing in return. The lights seemed pleased. They formed a loose circle, then settled, one near the honey jar, one above the basket, one floating beside a cluster of violets. Their glow was dim and soothing, more like candlelight than sparks. If a traveler had wandered in at that moment, they might have called the lights sprites, or fair folk, or simply the gentle spirit of the meadow given shape. Elowen did not need to name them. She only felt their presence like a friendly warmth. A breeze drifted in from the water. It carried the hush of reeds and the faint scent of wet stones. It also carried something else, the subtle fragrance of distant blossoms, deeper and more mysterious than the meadow flowers. Elowen followed the scent with her attention, turning her head slightly. On the far side of the clearing, tucked near the roots of an old willow, grew a cluster of flowers unlike any she had seen. Their petals were pale and luminous, almost moon-colored, though the sun had not fully disappeared yet. They seemed to hold a quiet glow within themselves, like shells holding pearls. One of the hovering lights drifted toward the willow, paused, and then returned, as if inviting Elowen to notice. Elowen rose slowly, careful not to disturb the blanket, and stepped toward the willow with the same gentle reverence she had used in the meadow. As she approached, the air cooled by a small degree. The river's voice seemed to deepen, becoming even more soothing. The willow's branches swayed like slow curtains. Elowen knelt beside the luminous flowers. Their petals were soft and thick, like velvet warmed by hands. She did not pick them. She simply admired them, letting her gaze rest on the way they caught the fading light. On the ground nearby, she saw a shallow bowl carved from stone. Inside it was water, perfectly still, reflecting the sky's shifting colors. Floating in the bowl were a few flower petals arranged as if to make a tiny boat. Elowen dipped a finger into the bowl and felt coolness, clean and refreshing. When she lifted her finger, a bead of water clung there, catching the last gold of the day. She watched it slide off and return to the bowl with a nearly silent ripple. Behind her, the picnic waited, patient as a bedtime story. The hovering lights continued their calm dance, never too bright, never too fast. The old mill wheel turned and turned, as if time itself had become circular and gentle. Elowen returned to the blanket and sat again. She took another sip of tea. Then she broke a piece of bread, spread it with honey, and ate slowly, tasting the simple sweetness. As she ate, she began to notice small changes in the world around her, changes so subtle they felt like breathing. The light softened further, shadows lengthened and became smooth, no longer sharp. The sky deepened into a richer blue, and the first star appeared, small, steady, and calm. The hovering lights seemed to respond to the star, dimming slightly as if they were making room for the sky's own lanterns. Elowen leaned back on one hand and let herself watch the river. The water's surface carried tiny reflections, leaf shapes, the pale sky, the mill's dark silhouette. Everything moved, but nothing hurried. Movement was simply part of rest here, like the slow rise and fall of breath. A little farther down the bank, reeds whispered to one another. Their thin leaves touched and separated with the gentle patience of wind. Somewhere in the trees, a bird settled in for the night, making a soft rustle, then becoming still. Elowen's thoughts, which had arrived with her earlier like small stones in a pocket, began to empty out onto the ground. Worries loosened, plans softened. The sharp edges of the day dissolved into the river's steady murmur. One of the small lights drifted near Elowen's shoulder and hovered there, casting a faint glow across her hands. The warmth of it was comforting, like a tiny hearth. It did not demand attention. It simply existed beside her companionably. Elowen closed her eyes for a moment and listened. She listened to the wheels creak, the river's hush, the distant sigh of the meadow. The sounds blended together into something like a single long note, a note that hummed beneath the world. When she opened her eyes again, she noticed that the picnic had changed in small ways. A new dish sat near the teapot, a small bowl of berries that looked darker now, like jewels in twilight. A few more blossoms had appeared on the blanket, scattered like confetti from a quiet celebration. Elowen smiled again, and the smile felt like a yawn waiting in the wings. She poured another cup of tea, then wrapped her fingers around it. The cup was warm. The warmth traveled into her hands, up her wrists, and into her arms, relaxing them. It was the kind of warmth that makes you feel safe enough to let go. The old mill, watching from behind its curtain of vines, seemed to approve. The mill had seen many things in its long life. Busy mornings, loud carts, sacks of grain, flour dust drifting like fog. It had known storms that rattled its roof and winters that froze the river's edges. It had listened to laughter and arguments and the steady work of hands. Now it cherished quiet moments like this, moments when someone arrived not to demand but to rest, not to take but to appreciate. If mills could feel satisfaction, this one might have felt it in the turning of its wheel. As night deepened, the air filled with a faint shimmer that could have been mist, or could have been the soft magic of the place becoming more present when the world grew darker. The hovering lights drifted slightly higher, forming a loose canopy above the blanket. Their glow was dimmer now, more soothing, like embers settling. Elowen took a small cake and bit into it. The flavor was delicate, vanilla, and something floral, like rosewater or orange blossom. It tasted like a garden after rain. She chewed slowly, letting the sweetness be gentle rather than bright. She noticed, too, that her body was becoming heavier in a pleasant way. Not heavy like fatigue, but heavy like a warm cat curled in the lap. Heavy like a quilt settling across the chest. Her shoulders sank naturally. Her breathing grew slower. The river continued its steady song. It did not change for day or night. It did not worry about tomorrow. It simply moved. Across the clearing, the willow's branches swayed, and the luminous flowers beneath it seemed even brighter now that the sunlight was gone. They glowed softly, a quiet echo of moonlight before the moon had fully risen. Elowen stood again, not out of restlessness, but out of a gentle impulse to stretch and wander. She walked to the river's edge and crouched beside the water. The river was cool and clear, carrying the night's first reflections. She reached down and touched the surface with her fingertips. The water responded with a soft ripple that spread outward in circles. Those circles widened and widened until they became so large they disappeared into the flow. Elowen watched the circles vanish and felt something in her chest loosen, as if her own worries could widen and fade the same way, dissolving into something larger and calmer. Behind her, the lights drifted and danced, their motions slow enough to be almost still. The picnic remained perfect, as if time had decided to tiptoe around it. Elowen returned to the blanket and sat once more, tucking her feet beneath her. The night air was cooler now, but her cloak and the blanket's petal-soft texture kept her warm. She poured the last of the tea and sipped it slowly. Above the trees, the moon began to rise. It was not sudden. It appeared gradually, a pale curve, becoming a fuller glow. Its light spilled across the river and made the water look like a ribbon of brushed silver. The old mill's stones caught a little of that moonlight and held it in their rough surface. The vines on its walls looked darker, like ink drawn across pale paper. The wheel continued turning, and now the wheel's slow motion seemed like a clock that measured only peace. Elowen lay back on the blanket, her head resting near the basket. She gazed up at the sky through gaps in the leaves. Stars were scattered there, small and steady, like quiet promises. One of the hovering lights drifted closer to her face, just near her cheek, and paused. Elowen could feel its faint warmth, a soft comfort. The light flickered once, twice, then floated upward again, joining the others. And if the lights had voices, they might have whispered a lullaby. But they did not need voices. Their presence was enough, their glow enough. They communicated in the language of calm. Elowen's eyelids grew heavier. She let them lower halfway, then lift again. The world looked softer when seen through drowsy eyes. The edges of leaves blurred gently. The moonlight became a wash instead of a line. The river's movement became a continuous hush. A faint scent drifted over the clearing, lavender and chamomile again, as if the meadow itself had exhaled. Elowen breathed it in, and on the exhale, her body relaxed even more. The mill, the river, the meadow, and the small lights seemed to settle into a shared stillness. The night was not empty. It was full of quiet companionship. Elowen's thoughts became fewer and farther between. When one appeared, it drifted away like a leaf floating downstream. Another might arrive, then fade just as easily. She did not hold them, she did not chase them, she simply let them go. The picnic, too, began to wind down in its own gentle way. The scents softened. The food seemed less important now. The blanket felt like a nest. The lights dimmed further, as if they were tucking the clearing in. In the distance, an owl called once, a low and mellow sound that did not startle, only marked the night's presence. Then silence returned, deeper than before. Elowen's breathing became slow and steady, in and out, like the river's own rhythm. The moon drifted higher, shadows shifted, but they remained soft, never sharp. The willow's branches continued their slow sway, and beneath them the luminous flowers glowed patiently as if keeping watch. The river carried on, carrying everything gently, never asking anything in return. At last, Elowen's eyes closed fully, her face softened, her hands rested loosely by her sides. The warmth of the blanket and cloak wrapped her in comfort. The clearing became her safe, quiet world. The lights hovered above her like a gentle canopy, their glow now barely more than a whisper of brightness. The mill wheel turned, the river murmured, the meadow breathed, and the night, wide and kind, held everything. The story of the old mill's floral picnic did not end in a sudden way. It simply faded, like music growing softer, like candlelight settling into embers. The clearing remained, calm and protected, as if it existed just beyond waking, waiting for anyone who needed gentleness. The river's song grew quieter in the mind, though it still flowed. The moonlight became a soft wash. The stars seemed to blink more slowly. In that quiet, everything slowed. The air felt like velvet. The world felt like a cradle. If you imagine the scene now, you might see Elowen sleeping peacefully beside the river, the old mill watching with quiet care, the wildflowers nodding in the night breeze. Nothing needs to happen. Nothing needs to change. There is only rest and the steady comfort of a place where time moves gently. Your own breathing can match that softness, in and out, slow and easy. With every exhale, the day falls farther away. With every inhale, calm settles deeper. The mill's wheel turns in a steady rhythm. The river hums, the meadow sighs. The small lights dim until they are only a memory of warmth. Everything is safe. Everything is quiet. Good night, dear traveler. Sleep well.